It's 10 o'clock. We're going to call this meeting to order. Are we live? We're good. Okay. I want to begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the First Peoples and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the county is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. And our first item is adoption of the agenda, moved by Fred and seconded by Jerry, that the agenda for the May 6, 2025 meeting of the Governance Review Committee be adopted. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Any disclosure, pecuniary interest, and general nature thereof of any item on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll note that in the minutes. And moved by Judy and seconded by Fred, that the minutes of the Governance Review Committee meeting held April 1st, 2025 be adopted. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Items of business. Adoption of an updated of County of Frontenac accountability and transparency policy. I will read the motion and then we'll talk about this. So moved by Judy and seconded by Jerry. Resolved that the County of Frontenac adopt an accountability and transparency policy for the County of Frontenac attached to this report as Appendix A, and further that bylaw 207-0038 being a bylaw to adopt an accountability and transparency policy be hereby repealed. Discussion. Jeanette, do you want to speak to this?
Certainly. So it really isn't much different or any different than the committee saw at its last meeting in April. It was put up on the Engage Frontenac site, but we did not receive any public comments on it. So it's just here for the committee's approval today, and then we'll go on to council at council's meeting in May.
Just a few weeks away. Fred?
There was no public comment on it, or
No.
they didn't receive anything? Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Any questions or comments? Judy? Oh, your mic.
Councillor Fowler makes a good point in that there's no public comments on it. And so I just wonder, on our website, did we have it highlighted at the front of the website or anything of that nature for those, or is it something that they would have had to search for?
So it's through our Engage Frontenac page, and I believe it was promoted as well through social media.
Not something that everybody worries about or gets into the detail, the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, it's just that one of our islanders often posts things and that, and I didn't see any post from her on stuff like that. And she sort of keeps track of it. So I just want to make sure that it is transparent enough that the public does get engaged.
She must have liked it. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, continued discussions on the procurement policy. So moved by Fred and seconded by Judy. Resolved that the procurement policy and the draft policy be placed on the Governance Review Committee Consultation 2025 project on Engage Frontenac for 21 days for public comment. Jeanette, would you speak to that?
So I can speak to that. So this report has been prepared by Alex, and Alex will be away for a little bit. So the report does somewhat cover some of the comments that were made by the committee last month in terms of having a little bit more meat in it and keeping some of the provisions that were in the previous policy as well. If there are any questions or further additions that the committee would like to see, then we would likely recommend that it be deferred until Alex's return. But if the committee is somewhat happy with what Alex has presented in this report, then what our recommendation is just simply asking that we at least get it up on the Engage Frontenac website for a public consultation.
So get it up there as it is, knowing we're going to wait till Alex is back. Judy?
I actually did have a a couple of questions, and one of them was in the definitions piece. And it's under proposal, and it's talking about a sealed written offer, and yet when I read through the procurement process, it's all to be electronic. So I don't know how we have a sealed written offer in that regard. Also, the criteria for single source procurement due to predetermined specifications, I didn't really see where the specifications were. And under the authorization levels, I thought we had talked about an authorization up to 150,000 for the CAO, and that not 25,000 if it's in the budget. And that, but I could be wrong on that piece. In under general provisions, number 4, it mentions that the Director of Corporate Service Treasurer not only is responsible for maintaining the policies and protocols, et cetera, but establish new administrative policies, direction, and procedures. I'm on the procurement.
No, I got that, but what
Okay.
section are you in?
I'm in 5 general provisions, and it's point 4. Okay, and the very last line is that the Director of Corporate Services and Treasurer establish new administrative policies, direction, and procedures. I think they can propose them, but usually the council approves them or the CAO approves them. But anyways, just a fine point. Separation of role of council and operational decision-making. And 5.1. To avoid apparent bias or political influence, procurement, members of council will have no involvement in competitive procedure process from time the procurement has been initiated through the advertisements, et cetera. I'm wondering, it doesn't clarify that we have no involvement after. It's, so in other words, to me, that's 5.2.
So that would be speaking to pecuniary interest?
Yeah.
Which we ask at
Or-
every meeting.
Or even involvement. In other words, if we have a project that's going on, say it's a building of this building, that we haven't got counselors getting their nose involved after the process has already gone through. And that for monitoring it or anything of that nature outside of council. I just thought a little clarity would help on that, but just the point. I wish Alex was here, but he's not.
Hang on, Judy.
Yep.
So on that particular item, this is a procurement policy.
Mhm.
So if a counselor was involved after award, that would be a conflict of interest, integrity commissioner issue and everything else, right? So, I think the point you've made is valid, but I don't think it's, like, I highlighted that, but I thought it was okay. So that's just my opinion.
Okay.
Okay, and at 5.5, point 5, during request for proposal, all communication with the proponent shall be through the county's bidding platform. And that again speaks back to the point that we're supposed to have, at one point, talking about a sealed bid, and then we have allowance for written bids. So either it's all electronic or it's not, with the exception of emergency situations.
So I'm taking notes here as you're
Yeah.
going through sections, and your first one is about the sealed written offer. Can you just point me to where that is? And
Sure.
maybe it's just a matter of.
I know we do that with a lot of things in our township. It has to be in a time stamped and sealed.
Okay, it's under the definitions part, under proposal definition, a sealed written offer from any company or individual in response to publicly advertised invitation for goods or services. So it's a definition of proposal, and it talks about the sealed piece.
On the third page.
And then the tender
Got it.
piece definition is also talking about a sealed written offer submitted to the municipal tender.
May I suggest just if we were to remove the sealed part, is that just alluding to the fact that it's in a sealed envelope kind of thing? But a written offer is still essentially submitted through our bids and tender electronically. I think that is the shift we're trying to make, right?
Jerry?
Along this whole line, I found the document a little bit confusing because the way we always did it before was a seal bid delivered by a certain time, had to be signed, maybe stamped, maybe sealed, whatever, didn't matter, as long as it was signed. But now we're switching to an electronic bidding process, which takes away a lot of the other stuff that we're saying. We're only going to accept electronically delivered tenders, responses through a bidding process. That's great. Takes away a lot of the issues that would normally have occurred with people in a township office. But I think we need to make are we doing this same thing for a $10,000 and $8,000 bid? So do we have to go back and, I think we should go back and look at that to make sure that we have enough separation between these here. In general, I have no issue with it, but I found it a little bit confusing. So when Judy brought it up, I'm going, well, yeah, I have the same thoughts. Not that what's in here is wrong, it's just that it's a little confusing.
So I guess the question to Alex would be, are there two processes or one?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Fred?
Okay.
Sorry, when I hear there's some sealed bid, to me, that's a secret bid that cannot be shared and only with the people that are involved with it. So leaving sealed in there, as far as I'm concerned, it's still like it's still something that's not out in the public and it's confidential.
Until it's opened, and then the opening, everybody who bids or wants to sits in when that bid is opened.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Kevin?
So just to clarify, there is currently our acting process is just through bids and tenders. So we have gone electronic. This is just to update and bring the policy in line with that. I think the word, as I mentioned, sealed is maybe alluding to the old way where it was submitted in paper copies, sealed in an envelope. So
Yes, that you stamp.
if that's the sticking point, I may suggest, and Jeanette, I see Jeanette wants to add something as well, that we may be able to remove the word sealed.
Sorry, so just, and again, I'm not Alex, but under section 5.5 where it's talking about requests for proposals and we're using that bids and tenders website, it does say for procurement in excess of $50,000. So I'm wondering when we're looking at proposals that have to be sealed, if it's something that's under 50,000, that the treasurer has authority to just go ahead and do. And I can give an example of that. We were previously looking at our Shred-it contract. And of course, it's a very minimal cost. So I had reached out to different companies to say, can you submit something to me? Something like that would not go through our typical process. So I'm guessing that that's where that definition perhaps may be coming from, is when we're not using the platform. And it's a small procurement, but we still need to do our due diligence, even though we're given authorization to spend that amount.
So if that's the case, we need to delineate that in this document. Jerry?
I agree. It just may be easier. I mean, cause like overall, like I said before, overall, the document is good. I have some issues that Judy hasn't mentioned, but overall, the document is good. But I did find that being confusing because how you treat an $8,000 or a $5,000, or even a $2,000 quote is different than how you treat $100,000 and $200,000 contract. Remember, Fairmont Home is coming up. It might be 20 years. That's going to be $100 million or more. And all of a sudden, oops, that's a totally different ball of wax where we're going to have to rely on the electronic bidding processes and everything else and so on and so forth. And maybe some of this stuff doesn't even need to be in here. Maybe we can rewrite this a little bit to put it in more of an addendum. When you have this tender, this is what you're going to do. Or even maybe it doesn't even need to go in here at all. I don't know.
So maybe the suggestion would be to incorporate our questions and comments today and then defer this until Alex is back and can answer these questions. Judy?
Yeah, that's why I was sort of doing my reading on through rather than looking for a great discussion because Alex isn't here. My last point is at 6.4, And it's regarding when only one bid is received. And, it's always a concern when there's only one bid submitted, and that the authorized person must either accept the bid if it meets cost and performance requirement. If not, the authorized person may enter the negotiation with the sole bidder on the price and scope and may reissue the bid request. So in other words, if we get a bid in that is over and above, and it's the only bid, I'd look and see what was wrong in us issuing the request. Maybe it was too restrictive or custom, and that to only one person responding. And that, to me, needs to be a lot more questions raised when there's only one bid, because most companies have competitors.
But I think that's a given in what staff do. Is it not? I guess Alex isn't here to answer that, but I know at our shop it would be. Jerry?
So the idea of accepting one bid is always questionable. It's never easy. You know, you are going to have, either we're going to have a cost in mind, or we're consultant's going to give us a construction or a supply estimate. Some would send it back to council, but you just can't go out and reissue the same tender. You have to change it substantially, or depending on the value, you could end yourself up with small claims court or a bigger court case. If we, I think that should be strengthened a little bit. So if somebody's doing something, say it's a $10,000 quote, and you only get one bid, and some companies will do that. Sometimes only one bidder will submit, depending how busy they are. And, you know, it's over the estimate, well, maybe it should go to the CAO for approval or whatever else and so on. And there should be a check and balance there. That's all I'm suggesting.
So this maybe should say a lot more
Yes,
than it does.
yes.
Kevin?
Yep, so I've taken note of that. So it does speak to reissuing the bid request, but maybe we can beef up that section to whether we're amending that bid request or what that process is.
Okay.
Note taken.
Okay, so if there aren't more comments, do we want to defer this? Okay, so,
If it's
Yes.
okay with you, Madam
Yes.
Chair, I would like to just, I have a few more.
oh, okay.
And
Oh,
I can
sorry,
do it
Jerry.
by section,
Sure.
okay? 3.3, fair and open competition. It says when justified through strict criteria, those criteria should be published. You know, so like, you can't add the criteria afterwards. Okay? Nice it would be sometimes. 3.6 talks about e-procurement solutions where feasible. I think that's a great terminology. Item 5, section 5, item 9. The county shall preclude a respondent from bidding if such respondent has made Nowhere in there does it say anything about poor performance. And I don't know how you determine poor performance. And I wonder if it's something we should look at or could look at. Like, what do you say? If you're a supplier, the product you delivered isn't up to snuff, but you accepted it anyway, and it becomes a dog's breakfast. I just wanted to highlight it.
And maybe it's vague so we don't get sued.
Yeah. And then 5, section 14, or paragraph 14. The last two items. So this whole section is good. And then it says the use of explosives for blasting and the vibration from pile driving or caisson work, provided that the minimum coverage for any such loss is. And I presume those are added strictly because of what happened here. I don't know if they should be in here. I think they should be in the tender. There's no real harm in putting them in. I think we could do without them. It's a thought we should look at. And then section 15, which is talking about insurance, $2 million professional errors and omissions liability. I'm not sure a consultant, maybe things have changed, but a consultant couldn't get that. Couldn't even come close to that. They only had a $300,000 or $400,000 insurance policy. They just couldn't get it. Architects especially. So I don't know. I think we should check that out. So we're in section Yeah, 5, section 15. I actually thought the document was really good. Item 5.6, first paragraph. And it goes back to lowest bid or whatever. We don't, in a tender, we're going to say the lowest or any bid not necessarily accepted. Okay, so 5.6, request for tenders, 0.1, and then B, best value for the county can be achieved by selecting the lowest bid that meets all terms, conditions, and specifications. And maybe in second thought, we don't need this, but I added and deemed advantageous to the county. Because you might choose the second or third bid because there's a better, softer benefit. I don't know if it's needed. I think we should just talk about it.
Judy, do you want to talk just about that?
Just about that, I think that could be fixed by just changing the word can to may.
Well, we'll say that again.
The best value for the country may be achieved by selecting the lowest bid. It gives you that wiggle room.
That'll work. Yeah. I used to teach tendering stuff. I'm just talking about anal. Like, right
It's
on this
important.
stuff. It is.
I'll get it right.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Item, I don't know this works because it's electronic. I don't know how it works. We talk about bid security, 5.6.1. Bid security shall be a bid bond in the amount of 10% of the bid price. I don't know if you have to sign these bid bonds. You used to have to. And if they weren't signed, they were not legal. But in this day and age, it's an electronic document. I don't know. The bidder may not have to sign it. The insurance company would. So I don't know.
My guess would be that there's some kind of a form that you have to declare you have got the money to
Yeah.
cover it.
Well, they give you that, and they used to, not all, some of them, you had to sign it. Wasn't signed.
Yeah.
That bid, no matter what it was not legal. So, I did highlight the only one bid. And then item 10, supplier code of conduct. So 10, sentence 2, which is county may refuse to do business with suppliers who engage in unethical bidding, have conflicts of interest, have demonstrated poor past performance, and do not adhere to ethical business practices. And this is a question only. Should the word documented be in there? Like, we know we're not going to use supplier ABC anymore. Let's talk about ambulances, for example. We know there's a second supplier coming online. We may be so totally ticked off with the first supplier that we're not going to buy an ambulance from them. We're going to buy it from the new company. But do we have any documentation that supports why we wouldn't choose them? So there should be something in our records. I don't know if it fits in here or not, to be honest with you. I think that when we're redoing this, these questions should be asked, because this one and the procedural bylaw or procedural policy are, to me, are the most important ones.
Judy,
I think what Warden is mentioning, especially the example of lessons learned during the building of this administrative building, I don't think we've ever had a debrief of how the building committee, and that probably be the most appropriate group to create it, but a report back so that we would learn the lessons learned, and that before anything else, and that we don't have to repeat any errors, and especially best practices that come forward in the end, because I know there's lots of different cost overruns that were unanticipated, had to come back to council repeatedly, and that excuse me, as well as any liability aspects. And I just think that there should be a detailed report of the lessons learned that before, at some point in the future, and that when Fairmont does come into fruition, this entire council could be changed. Many of the min staff may not be there. We need to have a corporate memory. And I don't think we've ever had a full report of what went right and what went wrong, what we will do better the next time for any big building project to safeguard the monies.
I'm pretty sure staff would have done that along the way and that there would be records kept. It's just never come to council in a report.
Yeah, I'm not sure it came as a full report encompassing the whole process. It probably would have came in bits and pieces as
Mm.
questions were asked of council or as we dealt with issues that came up. But
Yeah, I remember one particular question early on in our new council and that when there was decisions to be made regarding 600,000, 640,000, or 40,000 saved. And that was significant. But prior to that, the new council wasn't part of any other decisions. So even knowing how much the eventual cost overrun and how soon it started and whether there is particular companies in particular that were associated with it, those are all lessons that we need to learn big, because a lot of people can make a low bid knowing that they're going to be coming back, nibbling and nibbling and nibbling. So I think we need to get as much information into our corporate record and that, and make sure other councils are aware of the lessons that were learned around this table for this project.
Jerry?
Okay, so I think you're right, but I'm having a few issues here with what's the role of staff, the administration, and what's the role of council? Staff could issue a report to us saying, this is what happened, this is what we learned, what we'll incorporate. Like all these comments I have about tendering and procurement and so on, they're all learned the hard way. Okay, over years, and the time I'm finished, hopefully you pass them on to somebody. But, you know, like I said, we referred to Fairmont Home now twice, and this is the third time. And it's going to be a contractor or a design build, whatever it is, who comes in and is going to make his money or her money off of all the extras. They're going to cover their costs at a small percentage, and then they're going to do all the extras, and there will be all kinds of them. And that's what happened in Northumberland and so on and whatever. You know, your $1,000 item goes for 5,000.
And I think we have to be very careful because I think we don't want to criticize contractors because of situational things. So I think you have to tread very carefully in that there's probably a lot of information that would need to be taken into account as to decisions that were made. So I think an overall brief, but not too detailed to get into the nitty gritty of who said what and why they said it and all that stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead, Fred.
And a lot of this is a little bit beyond me, I'll be quite frank, but I find it very interesting, and I think that what you people are talking about does make sense, because you have to protect our us running our business and do it properly so that we don't get hit by somebody that's consistently doing something that they shouldn't be.
True. And I think staff certainly in their dealings over the years know those folks that they want to deal with and that they don't, and for the reasons. Okay, so let's defer this at this point. Do we need a separate motion? Okay, so moved by Jerry, seconded by Judy, that this be deferred until Alex is back, or you bring it back to us. All those in favor? Carried. All right. Next is continued discussions on procurement. That's what we just did. Oh, procedurals, right, okay. So moved by Fred, seconded by Judy, resolve. Or is this not a motion? Oh, down here, sorry. Okay, so moved by Fred, seconded by Judy, that this is a report for information intended to solicit feedback from the committee. It's no motion, right? That's what you said. So continued discussion on the procedural bylaw.
So if I could just start, this was attached to the agenda, but I've also put a sheet on everyone's desk. And it is the proposed amendments that I am proposing just from going through the procedural bylaw. Are you able to pull the bylaw on? Sorry, so the first ones are really housekeeping amendments, so such as typographical errors. We did this quite in detail during the 2022 review. So some of the, and with all of the changes, some of the sections didn't line up to where they should be. So a lot are typographical errors. One of the main ones there, section 4.3, we need to move the inaugural meeting to November and not December, given the change in the Municipal Elections Act. 4.9, we're removing the line, council liaison meetings, because we don't do those any longer. There used to be a differentiation between the mayors who came here and the second member councils, but that delineation disappeared in the last procedural bylaw, so those were removed. Again, the other ones are typographical errors. So if we go down to section Schedule B, B5, where remove the references to communal services governance committee. So these committees have been disbanded already. So we're just going to now take them right out of the procedural bylaw. Typically, when we amend a procedural bylaw, we put in the amendment and the, so if we're passing a new bylaw now, those can be fully removed. Again, so some of the major ones here, Schedule B6, we're recommending that that be disbanded because that committee has now met its mandate. That was the CAO Selection Committee. Hopefully, we won't need another one of those for a while. If somebody knows something I don't, we can leave it in. Again, the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, again, a typographical error in terms of renumbering the procedural bylaw. So those are really housekeeping items, if the committee's okay with all of those. And then there was some proposed, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Greenwood Spears.
Judy?
Just looking at 9.13, 9.13 in that, and you had the typographical for that. But my question goes back to the reference of the Fairmont Management Board versus Management Committee versus Fairmont Board. And I just want to bring that forward because that'll be later on. I want to make a few more points on that. The running it Fairmont just as a management committee, and that probably is not the best in our real responsibilities in that compared to board, but that's just in the 19.3. So sorry about that. I'll get back to it. And one other question in 17.6, and that you had whether or not the person speaks once or twice, and did you make a recommendation for once or twice? Yeah, okay.
My apologies. I
Did I
don't
jump
have a
ahead of-
recommendation. It's council's call. Just currently right now, it contradicts. The heading says speak once, but the body of the text says speak twice.
So we should speak to that.
Well, and I think most of us in our local municipalities allow you to speak twice. The municipal act says once though, doesn't it?
So the municipal act is quite silent in your procedural bylaw. I think I mentioned this the last time. The only criteria around there is a definition of a committee and certain other things that you have to do. But in terms of the meat of the procedural bylaw, it's silent. So it's what the committee and what council would like to see. Keeping in mind that during our council meetings, the majority of the discussion is done in committee of the whole, so that rule is actually waived.
Is why we've done it that way. Judy?
I'm sorry, did you get to 22.2 yet? I'm sorry, when you're reading through.
Now, are you on the proposed amendments?
No, I'm, Jeanette's list of proposed, yeah, and her explanations. I
So-
just wondered if you're getting to 22.2, did you call that one, Ucha?
22.12 to say remove this
0.20?
section.
No, 22,
No, 3 days prior to the meeting,
yeah,
by Friday, the preceding date
20.
of the committee.
22.20, I should say, instead of 0.2.
Sorry, I
And what
don't
what
believe I
about
have
that?
a recommendation in.
You have,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Is
just an
by
explanation.
Friday.
Oh. And-
Sorry, if we've moved on to the proposed amendments, so I'm,
Okay.
before we move on to the proposed amendments,
I thought I
is
was
the
gonna
committee okay with the housekeeping ones that are being proposed?
I would say yes.
I have a few more to add.
Now, are you in proposed though, or the
No,
top part?
I'm,
We're only in the top part. We're not at
Yes.
the proposed amendments.
okay, I'm at 5.10 regarding voting by the secret ballot.
5.11,
5.10,
where's 5.10? It's not on our list here, right?
no, it's not on our list. It's one of the ones I wondered about.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, so we're bouncing all over the place here.
Mhm.
And you know, at the end of the day, it's almost as if I appreciate what you've done here, I really, and the document is good. It can always be tweaked. You can always tweak somebody else's document. But I kind of think we should do this, if it's okay with you, in a more structured fashion. And if we said, okay, we have this procedural bylaw review, and we have this, and you gave us the bylaw, which accidentally I printed off. Lucky I used double-sided. It's still 25 pages or whatever it was. Oops. I know I need more
You
ink.
wonder why we don't know
55
everything it
pages.
says.
So can we do something that's a little more structured?
Okay,
You know, and like, even if you went through this, or we started with this,
well, that's what we were doing. We've started with this.
okay?
And what Jeanette has said to us is, these are just typographical errors that have been fixed on those first 3 or 4 pages. So if we're good with that,
Well,
and it
that's,
sounds like we are, because 5.10 is not in here.
yeah, I thought it was.
No, it's not.
Nope.
5.11 and 6.8. There's no 5.10.
No, no, oh, I mean, before we get to the proposed part, this was,
But we're just looking at the housekeeping amendments first.
Okay.
Jerry's right. Let's not jump all over the place.
Okay.
So housekeeping amendments, we're good with.
So that means disbanding the CAO committee. The CAO hiring committee.
Which is number B6. Has met its mandate and can now be disbanded, yes. But any committee that's disbanded can be brought back at the will of council.
That's correct.
Then this member of this committee has no issue with the first housekeeping amendments.
Okay. Judy,
okay, I thought the B6 was being part of the proposed, but no, if it's just housekeeping, that's fine.
okay. Fred,
Continue on later.
okay, so housekeeping is good. All right, now we're gonna go to proposed amendments. And then we'll come back to yours, Judy.
Okay.
So appointment to external boards and committees. So,
the appointment to external boards and committees, those are the KFLNA Public Health, that's the Food Policy Council, the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee. We have a separate bylaw that appoints members to those committees. Typically, it has been done when we did this bylaw review. It was done at the inaugural meeting of council, but taking into account that we're now seeing a lot of new members on council, and some may not understand those committees and may not even know that they're coming to council until, you know, a week before the meeting, if you're the second member council. We're just suggesting that that be removed from the inaugural meeting, and staff will automatically put it on the next meeting.
Jerry,
Which is the budget meeting.
the second meeting of a new council?
When do we do? We do it in December, don't we? Or January, but first meeting was late November, beginning of December.
Budget meetings are a separate committee of the whole meeting. So I'm
We're going
speaking.
back 2.5 years with minimal experience. We keep that in mind.
So your inaugural meeting of council is in November now. It's a very formal meeting where we at this term of council, we had it at the courthouse. It's a very formal meeting that is full of pomp and ceremony, so to speak. So there really is no business to be done there except for the formalities
hobnobbing.
of, yes. So what staff are suggesting is just to remove that because the agenda for that meeting is set out in the procedural bylaws. So staff are just recommending that that piece of the agenda be removed and we will bring it forward at the December meeting.
So that normally would, sorry, that would have been our normal first working meeting then, which is the second meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I can
Yes.
support that.
Judy,
I think the election of the warden and the deputy warden occurred at that inaugural meeting as
Yes.
well. So
Yes.
that is formal.
but not appointments of committees.
Not a point, no, that was done actually at the next meeting when we were at the Cataraqui Conservation Center.
It was.
It was, but that wasn't what our bylaw said last time. Was it different last time around in the bylaw?
Sorry, was what different?
When we swore people into their committees?
So this is again, different than
External.
committees. This is just external boards and committees are appointed by a separate bylaw. Our appointments to our advisory committees, such as the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, this committee moving forward, those are done at the second meeting under miscellaneous business.
Okay, so this amendment is a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so next, head is speaking once, but the body of the text allows to speak twice. So are we good with leaving that we speak twice? No? Judy? Fred?
Yeah. Yeah.
Jared?
I think twice is, the whole point is to make sure that if you made your first statement, as you go around, somebody may have made something that gave you pause of thought. And so you come back a second time and say, okay, I understand that point. I may have changed my position or whatever in that, but to just leave it hanging in the air is wrong.
Yeah, I think a follow-up is wise. Fred?
This is done in a committee of whole.
Yeah, yes.
No, this is done in
council. In council.
So this occurs before the committee of the whole.
Yes,
Or after.
and during, because that's pretty much what we go by in committee as well.
Yeah, so the only business really that's happening in full council are the formalities of the adoption of the minutes. The CAO briefing is in committee of the whole, all reports and advisory committees. So the only thing out of committee of the whole would be something like if a counselor puts a motion on the table, such as ones that we've seen in the past, allows people, that's done in full council. So that would allow people to speak twice now, as well as under miscellaneous business. So sometimes under miscellaneous business, the only thing that staff have brought forward are the appointments to boards and committees.
Jerry?
Last comment was number 3.
We're in committee.
It does say 2, and you can do more if the chair allows you to do more. So I'm okay with that. My council meetings, we don't have stop saying my, North Frontenac's council meetings don't have a committee of the whole, and I run a much more loose, as you do
I
as
do
well.
too.
You know, people want to say something to the point where it starts going around in a circle. I'm going to let them have that as long as they have that time, as long as they are respectful of what they're saying. But considering this is a much more formal organization, it's a different tier of municipal government, I'm okay with it here.
Which brings us to the question of, do we still want to have committee of the whole where we switch people around? Because I don't know that that's in here.
I think that's in the body of the report, but not in here.
We'll be getting there.
Okay, so it's further along here. All right, okay, let's keep going then. So we're good with that. 3 days prior
So
to
we're
the
just
meeting.
updating the heading to match the body.
Yes, yes. Judy?
Okay, for the 3 days prior, I'd like it to be 3 business days prior. Because if it's issued on the Friday and the meeting's on the Monday, if there's something that's a little wonky or we're missing something, there's no time to correct. Whereas if it's 3 business days that the information is sent out, then that makes it easier if there's a problem.
This is for committee meetings, right?
Yep.
That's correct. This is for committee meetings. So 3 business days prior may end up seeing that agendas no longer go out on Fridays. So right now we have agenda, Friday is agenda day. All agendas go out on a Friday. If we change to business days, it would mean this agenda would have to go out on a Thursday now, depending on when a meeting is. If Planning and Deb have a meeting on a Monday or an Accessibility Advisory Committee, that would mean that their agendas go out on a Wednesday.
Yeah, and the value of that is if there is something missing, such as a attachment that you expected to see in the meeting and it mistakenly wasn't attached, that you have time to get it corrected before the meeting, so you don't land at a meeting with a 20-page attachment that you haven't had enough time to absorb. And I'm not saying that's occurred at this level. I know I've been bit before at the other level on that with things that weren't in place and you had no time to correct it before the meeting. So that's why I just thought if we could make it business days, it would be.
I'm good
Potentially
with this because what it does is it allows the weekend for me to do my reading and because lots of people
Yeah.
around this table worked as well, full-time.
Yeah.
And this was a weekend job that you did your studying.
I think a lot of us have that, but I'm thinking if it came out even on the Wednesday, if it covered off for Monday meeting or whatever, but if it came out on the Friday and that, as long as the meeting's on the Wednesday, you still have time to ask. And that, this one wasn't attached, but if it comes out for a Monday meeting, you've had no time.
But if that's the point, then you ask for deferral. You simply, when that issue comes up, you say, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to I want to defer it. And you'd have the logical reason to do that. Fred?
Yeah, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking if Friday is the day that you get your agendas out and you got a meeting, it's in the middle of the week, why not send the agenda out the week before, the Friday before?
You have to have a cutoff. And you're
Yeah.
not-
Well, I'm just sort of thinking that would give us more than a week to look at, like, I'm looking at this thing and this is really complicated and to dive into it, some of us might need more time. And to me, that's, I don't want to miss anything, but I don't want to be lost either.
Right. Jerry?
So this particular committee, even though Jeanette referred to it as the cool group. All right, I do. All right. This particular group or this particular committee requires a lot of homework to go through. It's like all meetings require homework. But this one in particular means a lot of reading. You can't skip paragraphs, you can't skip pages, you can't just read the executive summary. You need to go through it in detail. And that shows when we're all here. But in general, and I've never experienced it at the county, but sometimes we get things from our own township meetings, comes out on Friday, and I can't get into it. So you can't get into iCompass until Monday. And now all of a sudden, the weekend that I had planned to use for this, I can't. So I think we should at least consider the 3 business days in advance. So Jeanette, you would know, or who's ever managing that particular meeting that's here would know when those days are. So you would know when the cutoff days are. It means it's a little bit more work for you. But I think if your meeting's on Tuesday, you know it's going out Thursday. Okay, if it's a Wednesday or if it's going out Friday. It works the way it is, but I think we can make it a little bit better by the 3 business days.
My only comment is just the consideration of staff time and the logistics that goes into all of this and the effort that goes into pulling together different reports. So for consistency, I think that is why the recommendation is for the Friday. They're very consistent with how we push out the agenda meetings for council. So I'm aware of how much effort and time goes into pulling these agendas together, and it might be logistically better for staff if we stick with this recommendation.
Maybe a suggestion is a committee like this, where it is much more involved, that we change our date to meet so that it still goes out on a Friday, but we don't meet until Wednesday or Thursday instead of a Tuesday or a Monday. Is that a possibility?
In my case, no. I like this coming out on Friday. I like having the weekend to actually do this. I used to try and do all my reviews on the weekend. Well, come Thursday or Friday, I forgot 90% of what I learned back here. So I have to go back and do it again a little bit later in the week. But I know how important this particular committee is and the amount of work is in it, so I physically set time aside. It may even be on the Monday night. So, I'm okay with the way it is. I'm just thinking we should consider it. If it goes to council, we can highlight that. And council can say, yes or no, we want the 3 business days.
So could we change it for specific committees? No. Okay, Jeanette and then Judy.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to this to keep in mind that planning and ECDEV meets on Thursdays, which means their agendas now go out on Mondays. So that means that those committees no longer have a weekend to look at their agenda. In terms of comments that were made by Councillor Greenwood Spears, if something's missing on the agenda, it still gets uploaded. It's an addendum. That would have absolutely no effect on the day that the agenda goes out, because if the agenda goes out 3 business days prior, if something's still missing, you still have to issue that addendum. So if it's just the agenda that we're speaking about, we need to keep in mind that if we have to have a calendar of when agendas go out for each specific committee, it will be it's the more inconsistency you have, the more mistakes are going to be made, and we're going to forget an agenda, or we're going to forget something, and then it's training all of staff to understand that your agendas now go out on a different day. So it's not just my inconsistency and something may get forgotten, but it's all of staff. So that's why we've kept it consistent that Friday is agenda day. There is another option, make Thursday the agenda day. Then I can get it through staff's head that the agendas go out on Thursday now, not Friday.
Okay, Judy.
I think Councillor Smith had a good point in maybe switching the day to perhaps a Wednesday for the committee meeting. And I'm thinking in particular if it can follow up after our council meeting. And if that's too busy of a day, again, if it goes to Wednesday, then that gives us at least the time frame to give it enough time.
I've never seen it to be an issue in my many, many years here. Yes,
Jim-
go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, please keep in mind that this is the only committee that is all of council. Most of your committees, the planning and ECDEV has 4 members of the public that sit on that. So sometimes they have a difficult time getting a meeting together. Same with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. They're all, except for 2, members of the public. So it's not just council.
The other question is, when are we done with this committee? How much more work have we got?
So we can slow down if this is going, sorry, if meeting monthly is becoming too much, because I know, I do know, I would say, so this is the last major piece. This and the procurement policy is the last major piece. There will be some other policies and procedures coming, such as those that we want to get in order around MFIPA. I know with Bill 123, I think it is, in terms of cybersecurity, there may be some additional policies around privacy of information that our manager of FMIS might like to bring to this committee. They're not major policies, but they're always worthwhile to have council put their eyes through it so that we're not, circumventing the process. But this and the procurement policy are the last major policies. I would suspect, as I noted in my report, that this bylaw received a very comprehensive overview. So I'm going to suggest, you're all new members of council, so maybe it's not working for you. I don't know. It's how much detail did you want to get into? But once these 2 policies are done, we can certainly cut it down to every other month. But I wouldn't recommending disbanding the committee, because if there's something like a change to the municipal act that requires us to look back at our procedural bylaw, same way electronic participation came into effect, we need the committee.
Jerry.
Why don't we just say, can we have it out by 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon? As opposed to 4 o'clock or whatever you do it. You tend to be earlier in the day anyway when you send it out, but we can have it like even noon hour. So, and just leave it as going out on the Friday. Would that be easier? say yes.
I would love that. But again, you have so many other committees and you have some departments that are coming to me saying, you know what, I'll have that report to you by 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock at the latest. So again, it's not just this committee and it's not just my department.
Which comes back to my comment about just keeping in mind staff time and the logistics of getting all these different agendas out. I think what we're trying to do is standardize and get that consistency.
My recommendation is leave it as it is, since this is going to be the biggest, bulkest part of what we're going to deal with. And see if the load lessens, especially for this committee. But I think for the rest of the committees, I've never heard anybody complain they didn't have enough time to go through the agendas and all that stuff.
If you do, say Thursdays or Wednesdays, and you have Monday being a holiday, you know, like a stat holiday creates issues. Quite frankly, I have no issues with this. You know, I think we should consider it, but I really don't have any issue. I have enough time, and I don't find this to be an oppressive overload of my time. Yeah, well, I think we should, that's a good suggestion.
So Jeanette has just said, if we looked at the proposed change, it is that they go Fridays, which is what we know, right?
Currently, the bylaw states for committees that the agenda goes out 3 days prior to the meeting, which means technically for a Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting, that agenda doesn't need to go out until the Monday.
So it
What
could go
I'm
on the
suggesting
Friday.
for consistency is that it follow the council committee agenda, that all agendas go out on a Friday.
And we can try it. If it doesn't work, then we can change them to what they're back to. Right, Fred?
I'm just making a comment that we're lucky in this committee because we've got a lot of knowledge here. And I think we can get through it. It would be nice to have more time though. That's just my opinion.
With this kind of stuff, yes, because again, we have lives beyond this work. And the weekends basically are taken up with this amount of information too. And you work with it every day, we don't, so it takes us longer to go through it and understand it and be able to comment on it. But I think we're through the hardest part. The rest will be a breeze from here.
And I also think the nice part about the structure of this is that we bring these multiple times. So this is the second time this has been discussed. It will likely come again. We have time to work through it in that manner.
And everything can be changed.
Last question. Has anybody ever complained about there not being enough time between the arrival of the agenda and a committee meeting?
Judy?
Not, oh,
Judy has, she says.
Not at this, but it is a point that, sorry. It is a point that I've come across in board and other groups and that, so it's always, we went towards the 3 business days to get around that, but I appreciate the staff workload and everything else. As long as, you know, hopefully our little compass will always be agreeable for us, that would be nice.
And if they miss something, you've got Kevin's number.
so we have had comments in the past that can agendas go out on Thursday, not more so for committees. It's more so for council because those are your heavy agendas. We have tried at the staff level, but you know, the way legislation comes barreling at you, sometimes you have last minute reports. And if they get added on a Friday and the agenda's already gone out on a Thursday, there's a potential that council may not approve the addendum.
Judy?
Just a final point in that on the longevity of our committee, and that given the state of flux, the tariffs and things are going, I think will always be needed to make sure that we are current in addressing, you know, the position of the province, that may be a position and not a bill that they've had enough time to pass, or the position of the federal government that may not have passed a bill in that. In other words, if suddenly they say, guess what, we aren't going to abide by that section of NAFTA because our counterpart is not abiding by that section, we need to have that well, Kuzma is primarily Ottawa, I think of, but anyways, whatever points being, we need to have the flexibility to address it really fast, because I think our governments are actually doing things more on the fly, and we need to be very supportive of it, and we know that they've got our back because we're following them.
Okay, so let's move on.
So the next proposed amendment is going under, so section 22 looks at committees, not council, it looks at committees. And section 22.27 gives members rights. So any member of council can attend a committee meeting and speak. They don't have voting rights, but all members of council have the opportunity to attend meetings. I'm just suggesting that we put members of council to make it clear that we're under members' rights. We are talking about members of council here.
Yeah,
So again, that's not really housekeeping, but it's very minor. And then the last one, which is somewhat not minor, is under the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting. Under section 4, it mandates that the committee holds 4 meetings a year and a maximum of 6 meetings a year. So we're having a very difficult time even reaching those 4 meetings a year. And to meet that requirement, we're creating agendas that have people for 5 minutes here, simply because the county does not provide services to the public. So we don't have recreational facilities. The only thing we really have that affects the public is the KMP Trail. We did have the construction of this building, which kept the committee busy, but typically it's at the township level that the meat of accessibility should be looked at. And the townships, we don't often see the townships even bringing things to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So right now I'm creating reports for them just to say, yeah, we've done all the staff training this month. So they're coming to a meeting, and those meetings are typically 10, 15 minutes because we just don't have enough material at the county level to send them.
That's just to meet the requirement of the 4.
Well, I'm not sure where this came from because I didn't find anything in the legislation, so I'm not sure where this came from, that they meet 4 times a year.
It could have been in the very early
Yeah,
legislation.
so we're just recommending just to remove that.
Okay, and my question relates to your point that most of this stuff is really more relevant at the township level. And I believe I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, in here that you do rotate the meetings for this particular group around to the different townships. Maybe that might be something we should consider so that it can be sort of highlighted at the townships about accessibility. I know within my own township, and that when they suddenly put up what they considered a partial security wall in front of the receptionist desk, and that I looked at it and I said, where is it low for people that need to have a low accessibility? And they said, oh, well, we'd have to bring them around from the back anyways, because they couldn't come in the front door of the old historic town hall. They'd have to come in the back. So I'm sitting there, that's where an accessibility committee report on it, to me, would have value to say that this is the accommodation that we made. So I'm just suggesting, I know that some that have disabilities would probably always be better to zoom into these meetings as well. And that speaks to other places in this document when it talks about 2 as a maximum for zooming in for a meeting and that. But I'm thinking, you know, somebody that's a quadriplegic that might have very good information that needs to be shared, it might be very problematic for them to get anywhere for these meetings and that. But I do see a value if they could come even on a once a year basis to the township and say, oh yeah, you know, here's even a bit of here's our building inspector and that, so he can be well advised of it as well. Anyways.
Certainly an idea, but speaking of Zoom meetings, that's another thing that I think we should consider. When you look at, well, the North guy's 3 hours to drive for an hour meeting seems excessive. Yeah, And when you look at somebody with a disability, often they have to hire transportation or get a special transportation to get them here. But yeah, I think definitely that needs to be changed. And again, there's no sense meeting for the sake of meeting. I've always said, if there's not enough on the agenda, you don't need to meet. Or do it by Zoom so that it's done, it's cost effective, and it makes sense. In a lot of cases, I know we like to be seeing each other, but you can see each other on the screen. Jerry,
My only comment on that is I'm okay. Whether, you know, one meeting, 4 meetings, whatever. I just think if you establish a committee like on day one or meeting two, the first meeting of that group should be person to person. After that, everything can be electronic. You know, that's just my opinion. So you get to know who you're talking to and whatever. Although you can do it over Zoom, you know, it's just making that leap to the electronic world. I have issues with electronic meetings when we get to the rest of it, but I'll let you finish where we're going with this first.
the only other idea is to move the county to the middle of the county instead of at the end. I don't think that, but then that's further for Judy. Judy,
To me, the only one that really makes the most sense regarding increased flexibility around Zoom is the accessibility committee. That is the one committee that goes above and beyond, but we all know that the highest level of communication is face to face. And so Zoom is never ideal. And I can tell you from other committees and boards and et cetera that I've been on, those that repeatedly come in by Zoom and that often don't contribute as much to the discussion all the way along. And that's unfortunate because I think they're there and they have a value in that, but it can be abused and that, but I do agree with the accessibility because of the nature, especially of those that are in the community that are making the representation. If they're a resident of our Fairmont home and that, for them to have to even get over here, it may be problematic and that, and if they're coming from Howe Island, may be problematic. And so I would say that this particular committee is the one that I'd be most supportive to allow for Zoom in the most for the community members.
okay, so the recommendation is to remove this section. We're in agreement with that, and if you can set it up to do Zoom, if that's what the group will want to work with.
So if I could just speak to the Zoom issue was not on this proposed recommendations, but it is listed in the report. So under section 9, the meeting types of council, that is where you find the provisions for electronic participation. And it does state there that members only are permitted to participate electronically 2 times. And there's reasonings for that. But again, when we're looking at committees, and it's not just the Accessibility Advisory Committee, keep in mind that your Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee has business people on that committee that are not always able to take the day off work to come to a meeting. So there's been a number of times where we've sort of closed our eyes to it, but many of them are participating electronically because they simply cannot get here. And if we say no to that, then they're not able to come at all. And then you're having quorum issues. So with the Accessibility Advisory Committee, we are of course looking at people with disabilities who are not able to travel well. Our last meeting went fully Zoom because none of them were able to. They're living with disabilities that prevent them from getting out. But it does happen as well with other committees where you've got the members of the public who are simply not able to get to a meeting that day because they still work. And if you're up north, it's your whole day. It's 2 hours down here. It's 2-hour meeting. It's 2 hours home. So we did look at that. That was one of the recommendations was, does the committee now want to look at electronic participation and hold that criteria to the committees? In the body of the report as well, there's also other things that we've noted. So for example, a member so there's reasons why you can participate electronically. If we're in a declared emergency, if it's bad weather, or if you're ill. So you can't, even as a member of council, you can't just say, well, I don't want to come in today. I'm going to Zoom in. You have to, there's criteria around it. But one of those criteria as well is a member has been duly appointed to an external advisory board committee and is attending a meeting or event hosted by that board or committee, should they be performing that role in Canada. But this does not take into account work that you do for your townships. So for example, if your township has sent you somewhere for a meeting, you cannot participate electronically at our council meeting because that's not one of the criteria that allows you to do so. So that's one other change that I wanted to just point out. We did come across that last year, I believe. One of the members of council was at FCM and they were not able to Zoom into the meeting because it did not meet this criteria. So I'm just opening up the floor to say, do we want to look at this criteria?
I was affected by it last year as well, in that when I was on vacation and was ready to Zoom in from BC and couldn't. And that's unfortunate because I would have liked to have been part of the meeting. That said, I do agree with having limits around it, so I've had people that have Zoomed in repeatedly while they're on vacation, that they seem to have a lot of vacation in their life. But I do think that a maximum for your personal use, and that might be the way around it, whether it's weather related, whether it's a conflict with something else or vacation. Or else a lot of people will be in the south in March and they may not be coming.
Well, and I think too, with COVID and with the respiratory stuff, we don't want to encourage people who are sick to come. Best that we see their face there and they keep their germs there. So we're going to look at that, expanding that for township work as well. Fred?
Sorry, when you talk about the Zoom meetings and everything, when they came about after and during COVID, there are other organizations that went completely to the Zoom, and I'll give you an example, the Ontario Court of Justice, dealing with traffic tickets and things like that I used to work at. And it's completely changed the whole dynamics of that procedure because everybody's on Zoom. And I dropped in after, this had started and it was amazing. You had all these big TVs up there in front and everybody was on Zoom except the JP and a couple clerks.
So I'm all for looking at this. If you have everybody on Zoom, it's much easier to run the meeting. If you have one or two people on Zoom and you're trying to run a meeting, you typically forget about who's on the TV screen and they don't contribute as much. And you just forget that they are there. And if you say, well, what do you think, Counselor so-and-so? Then they can feel that you're centering them out, which you wouldn't do. Well, I might in your own council meeting one-on-one. So I think we should look at this. I also want to look at attendance on committees. If you are assigned by council to go to or to participate in a committee and you've agreed to it, you should be going. You should be, if there's 4 meetings a year or 6 meetings a year, you shouldn't be missing 50% of them or 60% of them because you're taking away council's ability to, you're representing council. So I have that issue. There's nothing in here really. I want to make one comment. I told Jeanette at the start of the meeting that I found one typographical error. Okay. Dress code, item 7.8. All members of the council are expected to wear proper. You missed the 2. But I noticed ties optional is in brackets. There's nothing about women there or anything else, Exactly.
So if I could just speak to the one point about attending meetings, there is a provision, and I can't do a control F on this screen, but there is a provision under committees that if you miss 3 meetings, your seat is vacant.
Okay.
And that was a new provision that was put in the past procedural bylaw for exactly that reason.
So even if it's a council member.
Yes. because somebody else could be taking that seat and bringing back that information and
Or-
providing information.
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Judy,
Yeah, I think when you find that wording, I think it's 3 meetings in a row is how it's worded. And it should be 3 minutes, meetings over a year or whatever and that, because it could be, I'm skipping off those two, I'm hitting this one, I'm going away for 2 more and that, and it's not right.
which would get rid of the people who go south for 3 or 4 months, right?
As I said, you can skip it off and that skip off to work 1, skip off to work 1. And that, and basically in the course of the year, show up for 2 meetings out of 6, which is not right. And that, but 3 in a row and that limits it. Three is within a calendar year to me. because
Maybe
it's-
3 without cause, because like what if you're sick or in hospital?
There'd be exceptional circumstance. That's covered.
We're talking committees, right?
Yeah.
Committees.
So if we're looking at committee meetings and there's a member of council who's appointed to a committee meeting and it's being noted that they're coming to 1 meeting, skipping 2, coming to 1 meeting, council has the authority. It's council's role to appoint members, and there's a provision in the bylaw as well that states that you sit on that committee at the will of council and that council can remove you at any time. So you can remove your fellow councillors at any time if you want to call them to the table and say, you're not making the meetings, we'd like to put somebody else there.
Is that an open or closed?
I'm sorry?
That would be an open meeting.
Yep.
Hopefully we don't, because, and to Fran's point, if you're going south for 4 months out of the year, or going somewhere for 4 months out of the year on a regular basis especially, you are getting paid to be a counselor, and you are being paid to be here. So if you're not being here, you're not being at your township level either. So you're getting this whack of cash for doing, so yeah, we're underpaid, I know the stories, but you're getting paid for doing nothing. So I kind of think, there should be a major effort to try and be here. The only thing I would like to have on that, for missing meetings or being on Zoom is family issues, okay, extended family issues or whatever. If you've got a spouse that has to go here or there and you can't make that meeting, that's reasonable.
I
Yeah.
think family and health reasons
Yes.
should be the 2 reasons.
Consider the age of
Not so much
council.
vacation, but. Red,
Like our council has a alternate member that comes to the county council. And we haven't had to use that person this year, but they're available if they need it. I don't know if the other councils have that in place, but I know North Frontenac does, because I was at last year.
I think North is the only one that does have it. Do you have it, Judy? We've never done it in our township.
So just speaking on electronic provisions, and I'd have to look a little bit more closely, but I had thought we had put in the provisions when they reviewed electronic provisions the last time that you cannot participate electronically if you're not in the country. Yeah. So I mean, if you go south for 3 months, you can't participate. Pardon? No, BC is west, right?
Still in the country.
Yeah. Yeah, but any member that goes, again, it's council's call, so we're on the subject now of electronic participation. And again, for this meeting, because we are getting at 11:20 here, I can bring forward some suggested provisions for the next time around electronic participation. What I'm hearing is that rather than having,
There should be a reason.
so you still need a reason, so we want to add here personal reasons, like,
Personal health.
so we do have member is ill, injured, or on parental leave. We could put the member or their family. But again,
they have
how are you
other-
going to define those responsibilities?
You have to trust somebody at some point in time. You know, we can't expect you or the chair to, or whoever it is on a meeting to be the gatekeeper of everybody. You know, they have to be straight up and forward. And if they're not, then there's a whole different issue.
Judy?
Sorry.
I was just gonna say on that note, and that I think in the future, and that we may have a young enough council member that has childcare issues. And that, so that would be an example of, you know, okay, you're elected to council and that, but you need to make arrangements. It's like showing up for work. You need to make arrangements as much as possible in that, and there will be times that they can't.
And if you're,
Alternate responsibilities. Do we want to change item 4? Where it allows 2 times per year, do we want to exclude committees on that?
For the discussion.
I disagree. It can be just as vital if you're sitting in your living room.
How about with the approval of the chair of the committee?
Well, I'm almost thinking we could go, do we want to add a separate provision for committees where I mean, when we say we're going to exclude the 2 times per year for committees, does there need to be reasoning there as well? For example, provided that, however, committees can attend virtually if, you know, A, they have work commitments, or B, they're physically unable to attend, or
C, if the meeting is going to be longer than an hour, estimated to be longer than an hour.
no less than an hour.
More than an hour, I'll be here. If you tell me it's going to be 30 minutes, I'm staying home.
But if you live 2 kilometers down the road, it's a different story. I'm just wondering if we're getting into the weeds here. I do. Think about, it's one thing to mandate what counselors do. But when you have members of the public and they can't attend or can only attend over Zoom, if the chair of the committee says that's fine, that's a different story. Counselors, I have a whole different approach to. It's just signed up for.
So sorry, just for clarification. So are you talking about we're only excluding the 2 times per year for public members of committee? And members of council are expected to be here?
I think you have to say that you have to look at committees different than council.
Okay.
Right? Judy?
Maybe we should poll our committees. Because it is about them. Like we have our views and that is from a council perspective and that. But for example, planning and economic development, 50% of the committee is from the public. So they may very well say, oh, it would be wonderful and great. Or they may say, no, this is how we generate and get the best response and that, and our concerns are paid attention to. I think polling our committees might be helpful in that because we're making decisions about groups that may only have 1 counselor on it and the rest is all volunteer. Let's ask them.
We can do that because planning and economic development meets next month?
We can, but again, you have different committees, so you may get a different response from planning and ec dev than what you're going to get from the accessibility advisory committee.
We maybe do it as a quick survey and that's done electronically and that this is under discussion. We'd like to have volunteer from the community's perspective on this and just send out a quick electronic email with a 1-week, response time back. So we don't have to wait for committees, but it's a quick little poll for all of our good volunteers.
Or we make the decision and see what they have to say about it. If they take advantage of it, then they like it. If they don't, they'll be at the meeting.
Could we just increase to 2 to 3 meetings? Miss 3 meetings?
Oh.
I-
The thing of it is, they don't want to miss the meeting. Like,
You sign up for a committee, I think you should be interested enough to be there.
like our fellow from Myers Cave, he comes
I know.
and he drives what, 4, 8, 6 hours?
No, well,
Well, he's a good 3.
he's driving for 2 hours each way.
Yeah.
Cause he comes across our dock road.
So
One of the questions I have is when somebody wants to be on a committee, they should be given the rules and regulations that for the conduct of that committee and tell them what they expect. So there are no questions.
oh, and they do get that. Yeah. But I'm just saying, and Jeanette said it quite well, if you're in business and you're on the Planning and Economic Development Committee and it's June and you're starting to get busy and we're asking you to drive for 4 hours a day for an hour-and-a-half meeting, you may not come. But if you could be on Zoom from your home, you may contribute that way. So I just think I think it's logical.
That's more than an hour meeting, as you're giving an example before, and
That was
and-
an example.
And when you think about it
You
coming.
don't do the driving.
No, but coming from the islands, you do plan on 2 hours, whether you're coming from Howe Island or from Wolf, and that for coming for the meetings, and that's one way. So it's a reality that as counselors, we accept that, but as volunteers that come from another island, that they have time involved. It may not be actual driving, but trust me, it's time involved.
I'll bet Leona wouldn't mind being zoomed in.
But one more thing, and then I'll be quiet with this. I'd like Jeanette to put some of these thoughts or try and put them together. But I'm kind of thinking of going right back when if it's a member of the public, they're applying to be a member of the committee. So they know, here are the rules. This and this and this. If you miss 2 meetings for legitimate reasons, or you just are not able to make it for personal reasons, but you still want to be on the committee, it should be up to the committee of the chair to allow that two absences to be extended. Or somebody gets sick or something. I think we have to be reasonable about it. At the same time, there are some restrictions, because at the end of the day, no one knows what's going to happen to us on the way home or tomorrow or 10 minutes from now.
Okay. You're gonna put together some ideas.
So just to speak to leaving it up to the chair of the committee, sometimes there's different dynamics on every committee that you want to ensure that is the chair being fair to everybody. Secondly, we can certainly limit, but again, do you face quorum issues, especially with the Planning and Ec Dev Committee that has quite a large public attendance? And then the third, only from my experience, what I see, we have the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and when you only allow them 2 times and the rest is no, you're not only facing quorum issues, but are we now creating a barrier for somebody with a disability to be able to participate in the meeting? I fully agree that as council, you need to be in the room. This is where the decisions are made, but committees, I'm just throwing that out there that we have quorum issues, and we would not have had an Accessibility Advisory Committee last month if they were not able to participate electronically because they're living with disabilities and could not get here.
Can we not make an exception for the Disability Committee because of their disabilities? Set up a whole separate set of rules for them, exclusive of the rest of the
Up
committees.
until you get someone on one of the other major committees who
Complaining.
has physical challenges and can't be here.
Fred, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna
No,
leave it.
I just think as a counselor, I find it very important for me to come to my meetings. I try to, my best to be here because I want to contribute. And to me, it's important as a counselor to be part of the process physically.
I think that's true for everybody, except if it's going to be a 30-minute meeting, I don't want to be here. So, there you go, exactly.
So what
There
I
have
could
been
do
those.
is I can pull the 2 committees that we have the public members more so, and just to state, you know, that this is part of our procedural bylaw. Do you have difficulty meeting it? It's under consideration right now. Do you feel that more than two or that committees should be exempt from this, given your own personal situations, whatever those are? And see where they stand.
And then what do we do with their feedback?
So ultimately, it's this committee's decision to, well, not decision, to make a recommendation to council that either A, we're going to exempt committees from that limit to 2 electronic meetings a year. Or you could exempt the committee, or you could put a different provision in. If accessibility committee said, yes, we need more electronic participation, and planning and ACTF says no, we can put provisions in the accessibility advisory committee mandate that this committee, in order to remove barriers, may participate electronically or in person. It's ultimately what is fair and what
And
you
what
would
will
like to
work
do, and what
for
will
each.
work.
Yeah.
And I think that's respectful for asking our volunteers and that, because they may look at it and say, well, no, I definitely think we should all show up, or something else. I'd like to know their opinion.
Okay, let's do that. All right. Is there anything else on this issue? I think we have, oh, go ahead, Jerry. Okay. Well, I don't see really a spot for other issues.
Yeah.
I'm still,
Oh, you're still on this? Okay,
okay,
you first, Jerry.
1915,
1950.
2/3 vote. Can we specify how many votes that is? Is it,
Out of
well,
8?
2/3 of 8 is 6, and that's 5 point something. So is that 5 or is it 6? That's all.
Sorry, you would always have to round up.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, Judy?
Are we going down the list now? Sorry, are we going down the list for some additional pieces, or? Because for example, on the voting piece and that,
We've got 10 minutes and then we're going to call it.
well, let me read off the list.
Sorry, if you give me this section, I do
Yep.
have the procedural bylaw up here. Do you want to go section by section and say either no comments, no comments?
No, we don't
No,
want to do
No,
that.
we haven't
Okay.
enough time for that.
So which section are you speaking?
5.10 she had mentioned.
5.10 on the voting. I just wondered how workable it was, because we haven't had anything but acclamation at this point in time, but I know if we do a vote and we end up with 2 or 3 people, and that, how workable is it for doing a secret ballot? And that, because that goes back to you for,
You can't do a secret ballot.
actually, it's in our bylaw that we do, so that's why I'm asking.
So how that process works is if you get 2 or 3 people who have been nominated for warden and 2 do not step down, then what we do is we hand out a piece of paper to everybody and you put your vote down for who you want as warden out of those
Yep.
3 people. We do the tally and the count. If there's a clear winner, there's a clear winner. If there's a tie between 2, then the third one's knocked off. And then you do the vote again. If there's another tie, the names go in the hat and we pull out.
Okay. That's why I was just asking how workable it was for you in that, because we haven't run into that, so that's fine. 13.2, I and M, and that's regarding agenda order, and I was just raising the point again about the Fairmont committee as a committee of management. Rito Crest, which Kingston looks after, does it differently in that they use a subgroup of council and that to actually make up a board. And it's handled in a board fashion and that, and I do believe we should be revisiting that at some point in time, because the responsibilities of Fairmont, to me, is more than just a committee of management. It really is board, and certainly if we ever get called on the carpet, ignorance is not going to be our best defense.
So we're just talking about a name change?
At that point, yeah, it's the I and the M of 13.1, and that's changing it to board, but it does have implications later on in that for actually handling it as a board rather than just a committee report in the committee of the whole. But
So I2M,
yeah,
and L is moving to committee of management.
Yeah.
You know,
This was recommended to us when there was the changeover, right?
So if I could speak to this, we recommended that you go into the Committee of Management of Fairmount Home because there are certain legal and liability issues that you face. So we wanted Fairmount Home to have a separate discussion so that you understand that when you're in that board, you're facing liability issues on decisions that are made. Speaking very quickly to the city of Kingston, I did work there for a time. I can't recall which committee they reported to, the administration or the arts and something. They did report to a committee, but again, keep in mind that all committee recommendations then go to council. So if we went that route, that we created a separate committee for Fairmount Home that is not all of council, there's a number of councillors who may not have all of the information in front of them, and they're making decisions that could affect their liability that they're not aware of. So this was the best route that we found for keeping it at all of council and in the committee.
Yeah, at Kingston, the board is made up of 6 members of council on the Administrative Policies Committee. And the board meetings are held within the Administrative Policies Committee, and they move to resolve from the Board of Directors Administrative Committee only. And that's so it keeps that responsibility as well as that educational aspect that is needed for the responsibilities of that long-term care facility. So that's my thought, and that rather than just treating it as a committee of management, it really should, it deserves to be a board, and that for Fairmont is my view. But anyways, I just thought this is the right time to bring it up for discussion at least. And certainly can go to broader discussion. 16.1 regarding delegations, and that we're asking anybody that wants to be a delegation to provide everything 10 days ahead, and yet to me, we haven't even got the agenda prepared. So at that point in time, people that may want to speak to the items, when do they actually have the opportunity to speak to the items that are on the agenda at that next meeting? I'm just thinking 10 days is sort of an exceptionally long period of time to make them submit their information, that, and bringing it down to 3 days before the agenda is published. But it's still problematic when they don't know what's on the agenda and they may well want to speak to it. So I don't know.
I think that's to give staff time to do some research about the topic.
Yeah, but it doesn't really speak because they don't know that it's going to be an agenda item. We
You
don't
mean
do
the
a pre-
person asking for?
Yeah.
They know when the meeting is and what their time will be?
But they don't know what our agenda is. So we may have something on the agenda and that they would like to speak to.
That's not their job. Their job is to do their presentation on what their subject is, not to speak to, unless it's after the meeting, the next meeting, they could bring that issue back.
Okay?
Sorry, did you want me to speak to that real quickly?
Sure.
So if they want to speak to something on the agenda, they wouldn't know what's on the agenda until it's published. So at that point, it becomes an addendum, and it's up to council whether or not to let them speak or not. Typically, most of the work for example, for Planning Act Dev is done at the committee level, so they know what's coming. If at the committee level, there's something in Planning and Act Dev, like there's an approval of a zoning bylaw amendment or an official plan amendment, and members of the public were not happy with that, they know it's going to council the following council meeting. So that does give them their 10 days to submit something in writing. And as Councillor Smith indicated, it's just to provide staff with time to do research. So a lot of times you may get delegations who are coming and saying, I don't like the way you're doing this down the road here or there. It gives us, if they're submitting that information, an opportunity to be able to show council why this is or why it isn't.
All right, 17.8 and 17.9 regarding the points of order and privilege. I just wondered about rearranging the orders of 17.8 to 17.10 to 17.12, and that, because it seemed like a bit of a mix-up in the order to me, and that when you're reading the flow, and that, so if you looked at 17.8 and somebody wants to stand and call a point of order, and then to me, the next one should be any member may challenge the ruling of the warden immediately. And that, because it speaks to the warden rule in 17.8, and then if you have a problem with it, you speak up about it. And then 17.12, if challenged, the deputy warden will take the chair, and then go back to the other points. It just seemed like the order looked awkward of those numbers.
So, two things. The point of order is basically subject to what's happening on the agenda, whereas a point of privilege is the privilege of a specific member. So if something's happening at council, a member is being, I don't know, scrutinized unfairly, then they can call a point of privilege. And then section 17.9 states the warden will rule on that. Like a member may call a point of privilege because so-and-so is not being accurate on what they did whenever. And then the other person may say their reasoning behind that, but then the warden calls a ruling. So the ruling is for both. So some of them may be very simple where there is no overruled by council, and some of them may not be where there's an overruled by council. But the first part is that you're going to call a point of order or a point of privilege. The second one is the warden's going to rule on that. The third one is if a member of council doesn't like the warden's ruling, they can immediately they can challenge the warden here. Wardens challenge their ruling, the warden's ruling is final unless it's challenged. So you have a warden's ruling, you could potentially challenge it. If it's not, the warden's ruling is final.
So
If
shouldn't,
it is challenged, the deputy warden comes in the chair.
so shouldn't 12 go ahead of 11 then? If challenged, deputy goes in the chair and then council decisions final. Okay, all right. I guess I'd probably appreciate additional education on the points of privilege and order, et cetera, and that. Okay, 19.4, 19.5, which is number of votes. And I've questioned it from the get-go, and that as soon as I was informed that the mayor of South Frontenac receives 2 votes, and I understand the logic of it was because it makes it 9 instead of 8, and it's only applicable in the council setting. I've yet to see anything come up near a tie vote in a council setting, and that perhaps maybe at budget. But right, but having it permanently set at the mayor of South Frontenac, I think that that particular piece could actually rotate among the mayors and that. Okay,
So
because-
that is based on weighted assessment. Because their the size of their township, they have that one additional vote. It doesn't have to do with breaking ties. It's based on weighted assessment.
And they pay into the county, what, 58% roughly?
but when you look at it from a democratic perspective, in that all the MPPs carry 1 vote, all the MPs carry 1 vote, all your councillors.
We're municipal.
Yeah, but all municipal councillors usually carry 1 vote. To me, it's been something that is not the most supportive, that says those that have the biggest amount contributing in are worth more in that, and yet in landmass and in availability to other resources near to Kingston, that they have the biggest advantage. But anyways, that's my question on that.
Okay, you got three more comments and we're
21.3.
calling this.
No, I've got about 7.
Well, you can send those along to Jeanette.
21.3, which is 1, 2, 3 readings. I suggest we divide the readings down. We're given no opportunity for the public to have any meaningful contribution. If we're doing bylaws in 1, 2, 3 readings right on through.
Jerry?
I think we're, the way we do it now, we can do it 1, 2, 3, we do that at the township. Everybody knows what it is. I like the way it is. I don't think we should be doing anything with it.
And we broke it up in our township and that because it doesn't.
And do you
allow-
get lots of comments?
Yeah, actually
Yeah?
we do, and that,
Okay.
and that needs to,
So under our
access.
procedural bylaw, the public is not permitted to speak unless they're registered as a delegation. So even when you're coming up with first, second, and third reading of the bylaw, the public has no opportunity to provide
right,
input.
but if you did 1 and 2 and that, they might become the delegation at that next meeting based on the first and second reading of the
But
piece.
when a bylaw's passed, it's already been through the council, a number of discussions, sometimes committee to council. So it's been out there.
That is council's call. I can say that the city of Kingston also does that, bylaws get first and second reading at one meeting and third reading at the following meeting. Just keep in mind that that does hold up things.
Whole month delay.
A month delay. We have done that on occasion when it's been a sale of a property or because we do have to give public notice, but that is the only issue.
And that's the point in that for accountability and transparency to the public, that they actually have an opportunity if something comes up, that they need to have the opportunity to speak to it. The committees of 22.4 KFL&A is no more. It's Southeast Health Unit, SEHU. And
That I hear is in lots of financial trouble.
no, it's political, trust me on that one. And yeah, we have a discussion that's still in the public in that at that point. 22.2, change it to 5 days, I suggested, and that, but Schedule B, terms of reference, and that I wondered about refreshing and educating and that, because in the last paragraph of Schedule B2, and that we, at some point, and we had mentioned it before, and that there needs to be a bit of a refresh or even a basic education for people to understand what the responsibilities are. And specifically 5, which is the community improvement plans. I just wanted to clarify where that came from. Does it come from the township? Do we have some that I'm not aware of? I don't know. Schedule C, again, the KFL&A needs to be updated to SEHU. And point 4, I was wondering about 2 years and that because it goes back and forth. And I was confused as to whether people are actually on this committee for 2 years or 1 year. It just seemed murky. And there's my rush jump.
Okay. Everything, Jeanette's got everything written down. There will be more questions. But we haven't changed that.
So can I make a recommendation for the next meeting is that you now have the marked up working copy of the procedural bylaw. If the members could send to me all of their suggestions, I can put it on a sheet like this, similar to, like we can add the next one that is, so we have proposed amendments and then proposed amendments by committee members. I can put your recommendations into this tracking sheet. And then at the following meeting, you can agree, disagree, agree, disagree.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, good idea. Okay. There's nothing else. We need a motion to adjourn. No, we don't. Yeah. There's none here. Okay, moved by Fred, seconded by Jerry, that this meeting be adjourned until the next meeting is June 3rd at 10 a.m. All those in favor? Carried.
Well, pretty heavy duty stuff.
It's detail oriented, and this is the time to take the time in this smaller group than tying up council.